Hey folks, I am Adiraiju, the time-traveling giant monsterologist, and I'm here to take you back to when the economy was booming, communists were scary, and cars were the size of aircraft carriers. Let's get the time machine geared up, and away we go to southern Texas in 1959. The giant Gila monster was filmed just outside Dallas and produced by a drive-in theater chain owner who wanted movies to be released alongside his main attractions, this being the golden age of the double feature. It was made alongside The Killer Shrews and on a budget of $138,000. That is a laughable sum today, but back in the 1950s, yeah, even back then that was a joke. It's in the public domain today, which means you can find it virtually anywhere without worrying about royalties, but be careful about low-grade DVDs that just don't have a whole lot to offer, or even cut off the very beginning.
Enormity of the West. There are still vast and virtually unexplored regions, bleak and desolate, where no human ever goes and no life is ever seen. It is as though the land had been posted by God. It is in these lonely areas of impenetrable forest and dark shadows that the Gila monster still lives. How large the dreaded Gila monster goes, no man can say.
Well, according to Wikipedia, the very largest ones get to be 22 inches long and a little over 5 pounds. That's pretty big for a lizard, I guess. Anyway, cut to a couple teenage kids engaged in quote-unquote parking. No, seriously, they're just sitting in a parked car listening to the radio. Suddenly, something knocks the car to a nearby gorge and attacks the kids. We don't see it, leaving me to wonder what's responsible for such a... Oh, thank you, title card. Now there's a font you don't see much anymore, Severed Lizard Toes. Say what you will about this movie, but that title theme is pretty memorable. If that whistling tune came out of me at the dark around 2 in the morning, there would be scream. Anyway, cut to a bunch more teenagers screwing around in what looks like a small store. There's nobody else here, and I'm getting the impression this is kind of a small town. We're introduced to our heroes here, Chase Winstead and his girlfriend Lisa, driving up in Chase's old hot rod. When he gets in, they note that a couple of their friends haven't turned up yet, so they pass the time by screwing around with a drunken old coot who wanders in. Hey, it's a small town. The next day, with still no sign from the 2 missing teenagers, their parents call in the sheriff to investigate. The boy's father happens to be a cranky, wealthy old Mr. Potter wannabe named Mr. Wheeler. He doesn't like Chase for some reason, though the sheriff seems to be friends with the kid. Apparently, I'm guessing that Chase just has a larger hold over him than his father, and that's something that Mr. Wheeler does not like. Fortunately, this is the 50s in the States, meaning all he needs is a part-time job at the mechanics. Really, though, all this scene established is that the sheriff is the only law in this remote area, and Mr. Wheeler is that wealthy old grouch who likes to bitch at authority figures, but doesn't have any ideas for how to actually do their job better. The sheriff then goes to talk to Chase at the garage, and we learn that people are saying that they might have been in trouble. You know, in a way. You know, knocked up and skipped town. Okay, who directed this thing anyway? Did Commander Riker or Captain Morgan have anything to do with the script and directing? Did someone just go nuts with a baseball bat and whack everybody in the lower spine, making them incapable of standing erect? Every single character that we see during a long scene of exposition and dialogue winds up putting their leg on something in the immediate area, be it pipes, tubes, construction equipment, or car bumpers. Oh, wait a minute, I got it. The movie was shot just outside Dallas, Texas in the middle of summer. Can you imagine the crotch sweat? They were just drying off. He goes to talk to the girl's family, but they at least admit they have no idea what to do. He later pulls Old Man Harris over to smell his breath, but I'm guessing it's just so vile he can't smell anything on it at all, judging by the long pull he takes after leaving. Ah, the 50s, when drunken driving was acceptable comedy relief. Back at the garage, Chase's boss asks him to store some nitroglycerin in the shed out back. At least I think that's what he's saying. He somehow manages to be the loudest character we've seen and the worst mumbler at the same time.
Wheeler's sinking another oil well and he's afraid of fire when he comes in. There's 4 quarts of nitroglycerin out there in that cap.
Anyway, it turns out Chase used the sheriff's party phone lines to show up early at Rex when he hears about one on a remote stretch of road. And if you're wondering what that means, it means that a few decades ago it was a lot easier to eavesdrop on private phone calls. Turns out the wreck is a little weird. Not only is nobody in or around the car in spite of the seats being drenched in blood, but the car was apparently sent flying sideways off the road according to the skid marks. We then learn that Chase also sometimes adds parts from wrecked cars to his own, and the sheriff knows about it. Yeah, the sheriff goes easy on Chase after hearing this kid's sob story about his little sister, who's got some kind of illness that requires her to walk on braces. They never actually mention polio, but suddenly, bam, and we see the movie's title monster, a very real lizard that wanders lazily around a couple miniature railroad sets. The thing stalks a hitchhiker and apparently eats him. Apparently, leaving only his luggage and some cigarettes behind. A little later, Chase and the sheriff, heading back to the garage, come across the suitcase. Okay, I'll buy the suitcase by the side of the road being odd, but even in the 50s, if you're trying to tell me a cigarette lying by the side of the road is proof of anything aside from the fact that the locals are slobs. We see the Gila monster nearby, but the sheriff and Chase leave before anything can happen. This will be a recurring theme in the movie, by the way. For some reason, the film doesn't know what superimposition is, and we see many shots of the Gila monster just staring into space, while the protagonists wander around in remote areas in totally separate shots, so you have no idea how far away the monster is, or if it's even coming after them. I think the idea is that the creature is stalking them, but any suspense is pretty much killed by this. There's a fine line between subtlety and being just plain obtuse, and this movie doesn't even come close to that line. Anyway, Chase stops by to talk with his girlfriend Lisa. Apparently, Mr. Wheeler is threatening to deport her back to France because he's a dick, but the movie never actually makes it clear if she's here as a foreign exchange student, an immigrant, or what. The next morning, Chase comes across another wreck that occurs right in front of him. Apparently, some drunken guy saw the Gila monster run off into the bushes and ran his car off the road.
There was this big pink and black thing drove right in front of me. It had stripes this wide.
Wait, hold that thought. He mentioned seeing the lizard with bright pink stripes. If you check out the colorized version, yes, somebody actually bothered to colorize this thing. You can see it has bright pink stripes there, too. So it's official, the giant Gila monster has pink stripes as opposed to the yellow ones. What the hell, DVD cover, you lied to me. Then again, the movie also claims this is a Gila monster, but, fun fact, the thing in the film is actually a Mexican beaded lizard, the Gila monster's closest relative. They didn't even get the species right. Anyways, Chase tows his car and takes him to the garage while he fixes it while the guy recovers from all his refreshing beverages. The drunk guy wakes up in the garage with a monster hangover, which isn't helped by Chase banging away at some machinery. At this point, I think Chase is just taking his revenge on the guy for being kind of an ass while he was drunk. He turns out to be a local well-known DJ named Steamroller Smith, and while Chase only charges him about $5, the guy leaves him a $40 tip. If my mechanic only charged me $5 for a towed job and straightening my fender, I'd leave him a lot more than that, but Chase seems ecstatic. Anyway, the sheriff shows up and tells Chase Mr. Wheeler's being a dick again, and that his photos of the crime scene didn't turn out. Ah, the days before everybody had a phone with a camera. Anyway, the sheriff goads Chase into letting a few friends to help search the gorge where the kids went missing. They find a massive animal track in the ravine but cannot recognize it. Cue many shots with the kids hunting around and the Gila monster apparently stalking them again. Apparently. They find the car in the gorge and tow it out, the Gila monster ostensibly hunting them the whole time, but everyone just gets away. Okay. Chase tells the sheriff what they found, and the sheriff starts bitching about how Mr. Wheeler's going to be bitching at him now. Well, it's your own bloody fault! Cut back to the road where the Gila monster scares the crap out of an oil truck driver. At this point, I don't think we can even blame the monster for that one. He was clearly nowhere near the truck. The driver just freaked out at seeing the reptile and drove right off the road. Now, up until this point, the movie's been an okay 50s monster flick. And now things go downhill. Chase comes home, and his kid sister Missy shows off her new leg braces. It's actually kind of sweet, but then Chase kills it by playing his original composition for her, a dreadful ballad known as the Mushroom Song. We hear the whole damn thing. A strange ukulele tune that tries to be a spiritual for children, in the same way that Carrot Top is a comedian. It just winds up as being possibly the worst song I've ever heard in any monster movie ever, without any exception.
And the Lord said, oh, laugh, children laugh, the Lord said, 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 laugh.
After they put the kid to bed, Chase gets a call from the sheriff. Apparently, Chase's boss, Mr. Compton, was the one driving that oil truck. Driving oil trucks? Storing huge amounts of nitro? Is Chase's boss in trouble with the mob, or is he storing up supplies for the imminent war with the commies? Chase, the sheriff, and Old Man Harris, who saw it, check out the mess, and the sheriff mentions a whole lot of livestock have been missing lately, but nobody has actually cared enough to do anything about it in the mysterious headquarters that apparently govern the sheriff's entire life. I just think the sheriff doesn't want to do anything. Actually, that answers something I was wondering about. A 70-odd-foot carnivorous lizard has been sneaking around in the middle of nowhere all this time, and they're only now learning about it? What the hell has it been eating to grow this big? Graboids? I don't think so. The next day, we learned from the radio that Chase apparently called Steamroller Smith back and got him to work an upcoming sock hop at the local barn. Apparently, he works for a radio station called KILT. Walk into rural Texas wearing a KILT nowadays, and you're gonna get KILT. We cut to Old Man Harris drinking, driving, and singing his lungs out. Is that a bullet hole over his windshield? Apparently, Harris has quite a reputation in the area for his driving, I'm guessing. He winds up outracing a train to a crossing, and yikes! This was before crossing gates were quite so widespread, I'm guessing. Anyway, the giant Gila monster trashes a bridge ahead of the train, and the train goes through the most profoundly underwhelming wreck that I've ever seen in the movies. The huge lizard then returns to the train, apparently to check for survivors. Maybe he just wants to know what scale track they're using. Harris reports the disaster and the huge lizard, but the sheriff just thinks he's been drinking again. And in all fairness, he has, so... Cut back to Chase, who has some...
Come on, Mom, I'm just trying to make a hot rodder out of you.
odd banter with his family before the sheriff calls him into his office. Chase drops Missy off with some friends of the family before heading in, and he learns that the sheriff thinks a giant Gila monster is to blame. According to him, he thinks some salts washed into the gorge where the reptile lives, and it grew into a giant when the salt screwed with his pituitary glands. So if I eat enough salty food, I'll turn into a giant? Cool!
And forget it for now and have some fun, will you, boy?
At the sock hop, Steamroller Smith proves himself possibly the dullest DJ in the dunes, and Chase winds up on stage playing No! At this point, Mr. Wheeler's gotten bored, and as bored rich people tend to do, decides to abuse his authority. He stomps in and chews the sheriff out for not solving a missing person case in a small town in less than a week. Normally I wouldn't say this, but a bit of police brutality might be in order here. Apparently he not only came to the same conclusion as the sheriff, somehow, but he found out that Chase was using the car remains to add to his hot rod. Wheeler orders the sheriff to the sock hop, where he plans to have the sheriff arrest Chase right before he's fired. Wow, who knew millionaire tycoons had so much power over law enforcement? When they get to the dance, they walk in on Chase, who's still playing. The sheriff talks Mr. Wheeler into waiting until the dance is over, for some reason. Ostensibly it's so that they don't start a riot when Chase gets dragged off stage, but I think it's just because the sheriff doesn't want to get too close to Chase while he's singing whatever he's singing. Anyway, the Gila monster slithers along about now and decides to take matters into his own claws. He ends the song, for the last time in the movie, by attacking the barn. Thank you, Gila monster! Wow, it's a good thing the Gila monster attacked a blank patch of wall to try and get in. If it tried widening the door, everybody would be screwed. After everybody gets out, the sheriff unloads his shotgun at the thing, but all it does is annoy it and drive it away. Okay, movie, now you're being silly again. Everyone who's seen a monster movie knows predatory animals don't just leave and decide to go for something easier if they're attacked back and mildly injured, right? The kids start to panic, and the sheriff winds up deputizing Mr. Wheeler and puts him in charge of making sure several dozen panicky teenagers don't scatter all over the place. The Gila monster then goes on a rampage through the heart of town, which means there's, like, one house every mile or so. Chase learns that Missy is right on the monster's path, somehow. In his own words, they usually travel in a straight line. Yeah, well, they don't usually grow over 2 feet long or make strangled snarling sounds either. I think this one might not be playing by the rules. Chase gets an idea about now. Remember all that nitro they stored in the shack at the beginning of the movie? Yep, finally it comes into play. Somehow they managed to stop by the garage, snatch up all the nitro, and then drive out to see the Gila monster out in the middle of the field. And the lizard proves that even in the 50s, annoying little kids got off scot-free from everything when it completely fails to catch Missy or the family. Granted, Gila monsters aren't exactly sprinters, but this is just embarrassing. Chase lets Lisa out to usher Missy away, and then drives across the bumpy field with a big old box of nitro riding shotgun. Yeah, this is gonna end well. Oh, it just did. Mr. Wheeler and the sheriff show up just in time to be pretty much useless at this point. Are you sensing a pattern here? And Chase explains what happened. Mr. Wheeler admits that a badge doesn't help much when you're trying to corral 50 panicking teenagers, and admits that he was in over his head. Okay, I can buy the giant lizard and the idea that these kids actually like Chase's stupid music, but a millionaire tycoon admitting he was wrong and abusing somebody? Now this movie's just being silly. Anyway, Mr. Wheeler apparently finds the true meaning of Christmas or whatever, and the sheriff mentions that the railroad will probably buy Chase another car. Why? There wasn't a bounty or anything on this thing. We only just got conclusive evidence it existed less than half an hour ago, so... what makes him think that? Okay, here's my other question. What the hell are they gonna do with the body of a lizard that big? It looks like it's mostly intact, and the fire seems to already be going out. Are they gonna sell it to a museum? Show it to the government? End the ruined sock hop with an all-you-can-eat lizard barbecue? The choices are endless, but we won't find out, because this is the end. Oddly enough, the movie itself is what I'd say is squarely middle-of-the-road fare in terms of bad horror films. This is not a good movie by any stretch, but there seems to be an unusual amount of affection towards it. It even had its own fan-made website for a time, something not many 50s independently made monster movies could lay claim to, though it seems to have vanished from the internet. The movie even got an independent remake in 2012, along with The Killer Shrews and Attack of the Giant Leeches, called Gila. Or is it Gila or Gila? On the other hand, this is probably just because all 3 of those movies are now in the public domain. I think it's mostly due to the fact that the only people who got lots of screen time were Chase and the sheriff, and everybody else was just too flat and boring to really be unlikable. Missy isn't the obnoxious little Kenny wannabe you'd see in one of the Gamera movies, but this is mostly because she only appears in 2 scenes and doesn't say much while she's on screen. She shows signs of being a proto-Kenny, but never develops enough as a character to graduate to true obnoxiousness. Chase is a goody two-shoes of the highest caliber, and you get the idea that he's the sort who would be mercilessly beaten as an actual teenager, but he doesn't carry the part to being pretentious or egotistical, and again, he's largely too flat and dull to really be hateful. For all these characters, their flatness is their saving grace, and they never fall into the stereotypical roles that most truly awful films of the time would have put them in. Until Chase pulls out the ukulele, and then it's every man for himself. The result is a truly middle-of-the-road B-movie that's still worth checking out. Hope you enjoyed this review. Next week, we'll be heading back even further in time, way back. See you then.